Megalithic Star Maps with Martin Green, Part 2. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 Tangent Cube of Science, where we are nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau, and we have Martin Green on for the second episode, and he is, I guess, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient glacial lake, where he is.
Sure.
That's where you are. And the last episode, part 1 of the Megalithic Star Maps, has gone over really well. I love doing the episode, and we are looking forward to this week, Martin. So thanks for coming back on.
That's good news.
Yeah?
Let's hope this week is as good as last week.
Well, I'm sure. Well, you said it's going to be better, so you got.
It's my favorite content of the whole lot, I think.
Okay.
I mean, if you. I guess the most important was the sky map itself, or the star map itself.
Yeah.
But and that's the one that, I mean, some of the stuff is speculation, and some of it is I'll stand on this hill and defend it to the last. You know?
Right.
And the star map is one of the ones that I would defend to the last. Some of the rest of it you've got to make a judgment about. But the more digging I do on some of these things that might seem strange, the more it seems to back itself up in multiple ways, and you'll see some of that as we go through this. So today, I'm not quite sure how far we'll get through today, but today let's share the screen and have a look at the proper thing.
Sure. Right.
So we're episode 2, so we're going to do what I've called a place on the map, a cathedral, and something about the Great Year. It starts off a little slow in some respects, in that and I still don't understand how to get the first screen to go over. There we go. So let's just have a quick reprise of what we did last time, and it is quick. It's only like 3 slides. So we talked about the biggest stone row in Britain, so the Devil's Arrows. We talked about the henges at Thornborough, and you should all be experts now on what a henge is. And there's a proper picture. There'll be questions at the end.
Oh no.
And if you remember, this was the map on the ground. So the Thornborough henges up there, the Devil's Arrows down there, next to a very attractive little market town called Boroughbridge. And beyond Boroughbridge, there's a town called Aldborough, which will be of some significance today. And then the local built-up area is Ripon. It's, I think, the smallest city in Britain. And there's also a small group of other henges there. So we then started looking at the stars, and these were the stars that we were particularly interested in. Orion's belt, because that is already acknowledged to be represented by the Thornborough henges. And then we went on to look at the Pleiades and the Hyades, which is the face of Taurus, with Aldebaran there. And this is what we identified. So those are the belt stars of Orion. There's Aldebaran, and there's the Devil's Arrows, and they're all pretty spot on as a star map. So by now, you should be believing that these builders had a high level of technical competence, and we did discuss this week, last week. I was going to say next week. Time machine. How did they do it though? Because we don't think they had any means of writing stuff down or anything. And if our civilization vanished tomorrow, I mean, if you had to go out and survey something, you'd take a notepad and probably a laptop with you, and you'd record everything you did. And you'd take that home and you'd sit in your office and you'd draw out a plan of what you wanted to do based on the information that you gathered. Well, if they couldn't write it down, how on earth did they do it? If our civilization ended tomorrow, everything that's digital would be probably totally lost forever. Because even if you could recover it after, say, 5,000 years, which is the gap back to when the henges were built, roughly, say it's 5,000 years, it's near as makes no difference. So if you recover a hard disk in 5,000 years' time, well, you've got to understand it's a hard disk to start off with. And then you've got to get it spinning, and I suspect that everything will be damaged on it, and there'll be no way of retrieving the data. And it'd be the same with any sort of chip that you pull back. So all of that would be lost. So the only thing that might survive are books. But then again, it's only if somebody has protected them and copied them.
Our
So you
tombstones. Our tombstones will be around.
Well spotted.
Yeah, I was going to say that how long does paper last? But anything they wrote in stone, if they did, then we might still have it.
But we do write things in stone. So we have statues and tombstones and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So is this their writing?
Yeah.
Are these the statues that they put together, or the equivalent of statues and tombstones and memorable things? Now, it was just a thought I had one night, but I thought it was interesting, and it might challenge some graduate student to a PhD project. Who knows?
If those those series, the cup marks like you have on the middle picture on the left there, if that is actually writing, then it is possible that some of the hinge complexes are giant glyphs, right? It's a big letter.
Yeah. It could well be, couldn't it?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, we can't read it, so who knows? Anyway, so today, what I want to talk about is why this location, so why the layout and why is it in the current place. So we've got a number of theories that I want to discuss, and those are whether it's a reflection of the moon, and three that no one has ever realised before. So Aldebaran, because no one knows of its significance. The legend, I think when Shannon was on, she talked about the legend of the devil standing on the hill and throwing the stones, and it's just mythological rubbish, isn't it? Can't be anything behind it. But is there really? Is it mythological rubbish? I then go and talk about Ripon Cathedral. You saw where Ripon was. It's not very far from the main line between the Devil's Arrows and the Henges. And I developed that quite a lot. Then if we have time, I want to go on and talk about whether the place on the map itself, so 54 degrees north, and well, I don't think it matters whereabouts around the world it is, but it might do. I mean, it's just that I've not realised that it does, is a special location, and it wouldn't be in if I didn't think it was. Then once again, if we have time, we'll have a quick look at the wider Yorkshire area, including Rudstone, which is the centre of magic in Yorkshire, I think. You'll see that as you go.
Magic.
Got the biggest stone in the whole of Britain, Rudstone. So why was it built in this location? So could it be because it's near the quarry? Well, it's actually over 8 miles away. So I've got another slide on it showing the profile of the land, but I won't want to drag three great big stones, and probably more than three great big stones over that distance. So we're just going to review the ideas and just remind you what we're looking at. So this is what we're looking at, and those lines and those positions. So this is the quarry. I always thought to be the quarry. No one really knows, to be fair. It's over 8 miles away. You can see the type of stone it is, Kyle, when we were talking about, do you remember we were talking about the grooves in the top?
Yes.
And we do get cracks down the bedding planes. So it is possible that those grooves are caused by erosion from the weather. But none of these quite look the same to me.
Yeah.
They're not as wide and as deep. Well, deep, but you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's possible that it's because where they've stood them up, they've turned the planes vertical.
Yeah.
Whereas here, the planes are horizontal, and so they're being weathered in a different way. But if it's turned vertical, then, you know, like there are some places where sedimentary stone has naturally been turned 70 to 90 degrees, and then the weathering is wild. It looks really strange.
Yeah.
So,
But if the weathering is based on weaker layers versus stronger layers, then even if you turned it vertically, it would weather the same way because it's really the weaker layers that are being eroded away first.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think, and I can't prove it, I would like to think that they did some shaping of the top. Put sort of groove in, but you can't prove it, so it's hardly worth going there.
Is it? Why do they think this is the quarry? Just because it looks like it might be? I mean,
it's the nearest place where this sort of stone is. So this Yorkshire grit stone, which we said last week was a very hard sandstone with lots of quartz in it. Quartz might be a pointer to what it's all about as well.
See, it's interesting also that it's right on the water. Is that right?
Yeah.
So you don't really have a good platform to stand on down below.
No.
You have to work from above.
Unless the water wasn't there.
Right.
The water might not have been there 5,000 years ago.
Okay.
Right. But anyway, was it built near the site of the quarry? Well, quarry's 8 miles away, and this is the hill profile. So there's the quarry. You have to drag it up that hill.
Well,
then
at least it's mostly downhill.
Stop it collapsing down that hill, drag it up there and drag it up there. I don't think they'd do that.
Is there a river they could ship it down for part of the way? That's what I thought of when I saw that this quarry is supposed to be on the water. Can you just drop it onto a boat and move it down river?
The river goes along here and up there. You could probably get to it, but you'd have to go quite a way. So
Okay.
I'm not sure is the answer. So, but anyway, if they were building it near the quarry, it'd be here, wouldn't it? So,
Yes. Yes.
so the answer is no, they haven't built it near the quarry. So these are the stars. Now, if you centered it around the Pleiades, you could move this around in any direction you wanted. And providing you got the points on the ends in the right place and at the right distance, it would still reflect this shape. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's basically what I'm saying down the side here. So we could rotate it right round the devil's arrows, and the shape on the ground would still be the same. So why do we have this axis, the red one, in that funny angle? Because you'd expect it really to be north-south or east-west, and it's not. You can see it's not.
Because didn't you say because the river is supposed to be the Nile? Is that?
The river is supposed to be the
I'm sorry. The
Milky
river is
Way.
supposed to be the Milky Way. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, the river could be the Milky Way, but even then you could, I mean, if you rotated it a bit further around, you could have the Henges appear,
Yes.
and you'd still pick up the river. So, you know, it's people have puzzled about this for years and years and years. And there are several possible solutions that they've put forward, and some of them are absolute rubbish, as we'll see as we go through.
What is that angle?
That's 141.2 degrees azimuth, so measured from North. This one is 151.2 degrees.
So
So which way is north on this picture?
North is
Straight
top.
up? Okay.
Yeah.
So 100 and
Here we go.
Yeah. It's 141, 151. Both of them got a 0.2 on the end, but if we get that accurate, we'll be doing one. So the first question I asked myself was, we'd found this was the Pleiades. Could that line be aligned to the rising of the Pleiades? And we'll look at that as we go on. Many people who have investigated it have said it could well be a lunar standstill marker. So I've got a few slides on the movements of the moon, so I don't know whether you want to go through them or not. I think it's probably worth it, because anyone that's in this sort of, trying to do anything on this sort of thing needs to understand how the moon moves.
we always welcome any slides on the moon.
Yep.
Right, okay. So the moon's movements are complex, and it took me about 3 years to understand even the basic ones. And what I'm telling you are the basic ones. So its rising point moves along the horizon in 2 periods of time, so the 28-day lunar month. So in a month, it starts at a northerly point for that month, and then every day after that, it moves a little bit further south until after 14 days, it reaches the southern point in the month. It then travels back for 14 days, and obviously the set point mirrors this. So what you get is, this is the 1st of May 2025, and there is a reason I've chosen that date. But you can see that it's rising right over here and comes down there. So this is its northern point, and at its northern point, it'll be the highest in the sky, and the set will be the furthest south. So 14 days later, so this is the 15th of May, every day after the 1st of May, it would rise a little bit further along here until it reaches this point. And this is its furthest south rise in that month. And in fact, as we shall see, is its furthest south rise ever. And you'll see that it's very low in the sky at that point. So it also has an 18.6 year cycle. So within a month, there's an extreme northern point of rise and an extreme southern point of rise. But within the 18-year cycle, that rise point each month also moves. So each month, starting at its furthest north point on a given day of the month, the next day, 28 days later, that rise point will be a little bit further south, and then the next month a little bit further south still. So from the northern, that's basically what I've just said, it'll move further south, and the set point moves progressively northwards. So the rise and set points move towards each other, and the moon gets lower in the sky. So the previous picture showed the most extreme points in this cycle. So this is 5 years later. So this is 2029, and it's the 15th of May. And you'll see that that was the line that was the extreme point in 2025. So each month it's moved a little bit further down here. So it's reached this point by that stage. And likewise, the set point. So in this particular month, it would rise. Each day would rise further and further south until it reaches here, and you'll see that that is the gap that it is. It's never going to rise in that bit within that period.
So this is the minimum. So I'm not sure I'm following. Is this the minimum points in the cycle? Because there's a maximum standstill and a minimum standstill.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what we're going on to. This is the maximum standstill, and after half of 9.3 years, it gets down to the and that's the minimum.
Gotcha.
Right, so that's 2034. So every month it's advanced down here until it reaches here. And as it reaches there, it's the movement slows. So it looks as though it's more or less at a standstill. So I don't know whether you got all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this point here is a major lunar standstill, and this is a minor lunar standstill. And likewise with the set, likewise at the other end, at the lower end, you have two major ones and two minor ones. And you have the rises and sets of both of those. Yeah?
Yep.
So are the sets are on the right side of the
the sets are on the right side.
So
and
I want to make sure I understand this, because this is what I thought. It goes from the maximum all the way down to the minimum, and then when it comes back towards the maximum, it goes to the minor, comes all the way back up to the minor standstill, then goes down to the minor standstill, then goes back up to the maximum standstill, and goes down to the maximum.
So it oscillates between these two.
Yes.
At the extreme end, at this extreme end, and between these two on this extreme end.
Okay.
I like these pictures because it makes it easy to see that we're looking at part of a disc. The moon's orbital plane. You can now see it clearly.
Do you remember last time I talked about the archaeo lines in Stellarium?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what these are.
Yeah.
So you turn these on, and that's what you get. It's quite easy then to say, yes, it's rising at 70 degrees by the looks of it there. So there are other cycles. So there's the nodal cycle, which is interesting. It's also 18.6 years. Now, the movement, the line that the moon moves in the sky isn't the same exactly as the sun moves. So they're at a sort of angle like that, and they cross each other. Where they cross each other is the node, and that is the only place where you can get an eclipse. And the cycle of that is 18.6 years. And there are a few other cycles there, which I won't bother going into. But when you get right out to the ends, so the maximum and the minimum standstills, you're too far out at that point to get an eclipse. So you'll never get an eclipse at those points. Okay, does any of that make sense?
When you get to the standstills,
I'm still reading about these other cycles.
What was it? Right. Say it again. When you get to the standstills.
Yeah, they're too far out to get an eclipse at those points.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Okay.
And that has to do with the angle at which the moon's orbit is to the Earth's orbit, right?
Yes, it must be, mustn't it? Yeah. I think of it as you drew it on the sky, but last time when we were talking about lowering the sky down and stuff, you obviously think about these things slightly different, but it's the same thing, yeah.
What is the difference between the maximum and minimum standstills in degrees? Is it like 5 or 6, something around there?
I don't know whether it's the same on. I don't know whether it's the same on every latitude because I've never looked at it. But this is from the Devil's Arrows. We're talking about 57 to 6 to 70 there,
50,
and the other, the other end.
It is interesting because depending on where you are on the planet, your
that angle can change.
your
Yeah.
perspective of it is different because
Okay.
it's got
Yeah.
you know, the vanishing point is got
Yeah.
That's right.
so
yeah.
that would change the width of the band.
Yeah. So, and that's why it's useful having been able to turn these things on because you'd never find it otherwise.
Right.
I mean, you'd have to run the moon through for 18.6 years to find the point.
Wow.
And
Assign it
that's
to your
what
apprentice.
that's what I started by doing because I didn't know this stuff existed. So, how do I find a major lunar standstill? I know. I'll let it run through and find out the most extreme.
Go out every night with your surveying equipment and measure it.
That's what they'd have to do. I mean, I can press a button on a computer and it's still a pain.
Right.
I mean, it is a real pain because you miss it sometimes. You know, you get diverted and it's moved.
Right. Or it's cloudy. That's
and if they're going out and it's cloudy and rainy, and then it's gone.
Like, well, gotta wait another 18 years before we see that particular.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure I've not explained that very well, but I hope people have understood.
The moon moves around the sky and it's hard to understand. That's basically what you're
right.
explaining.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. If you take that away, you'll be fine. So people have suggested that. They've also suggested it's a solstice marker or the rise point of Sirius. And we'll have a quick look at all of those. So these are the solutions we're going to be looking at. So is it aligned to the Pleiades or to Orion's belt? Now, that's new because no one knew whether, or no one else knows that the Pleiades are the Devil's Arrows or that line exists, really. Is it a solstice marker? Is it the rise of Sirius? Is it a mapping of the map to the ground? Also new because no one knows about the other places. Is it a lunar standstill marker? Is it that 152 degrees from Canabarn Henge? Is that something to do with that? And then we look at the legend, and finally Ripon Cathedral comes into it. And you won't be able to see why at the moment, but we'll get there. So just a bit of background first. So we consider an object risen when it actually passes over the horizon, but the ancients, it's said that they didn't know when it did. I think the evidence points to the fact that they did know when it did, but they considered that it was about a degree above. So if you go to one of the well-known places and look at the alignment marker on the horizon, which has been identified, that will show you when the object is about a degree to a degree and a half above the horizon. Because you've got to get the whole object above. So if it's the moon, for instance, that's half a degree. So it's about a degree to a degree and a half above. So we're looking at the Pleiades here. And we're looking for an angle of 141 degrees. Well, the most southerly rise of the Pleiades is 128 degrees. So this is the Pleiades rise over the years, and you'll see that it goes back to 50,000 years and 18,000 years into the future. And the most southerly rise in this particular cycle was about 9,000 and something years, but it's 128 degrees. You'll also see that each cycle is slightly different, and that's because the tilt of the Earth is changing.
This is the
So-
the axial nod.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So you're getting a rock there that's caused by the what's 23.5 degrees now. And that's come down from, I think it was about the maximum around here from memory. That's 42,000 year cycle. And I think it's 24.5 degrees is the maximum, I think. And we're currently at 23.5. So 128 degrees, looking for 141. No, Orion's belt does actually reach that, but it's about 5,300 and 4,600 between those dates, depending which star you're looking at. So that's not the reason it's being built there. So is it a solstice marker? So once again, we're looking at the same angles. Viewed from the Devil's Arrows, that line is 321 degrees.
Wait, can we real quick? Can we go back to this? Why were you saying that these particular dates for the rising of Orion are not significant? What's the criteria for them to be significant dates?
I was afraid you were going to ask that. That's based on the standard build date. So the standard build date is 2,800 BC.
Okay.
Yeah. I would be surprised if it was that date. I've got another date in mind as well as, well, I've got two other dates in mind. One of them is near 2,800, and the other is vastly different. But I can't put anything down to this date, and to be fair, I've not researched it.
Okay.
It was only when I was writing this slide that I even thought of putting that in. So there's a possibility it might be.
So yeah, it could be if it's basically you're saying they would have to be roughly that old for those dates to be okay.
Yeah. Or something happened on those dates that they wanted to commemorate.
Yeah. Okay.
So is it a solstice marker? So those are the lines. And from Thornborough, the winter solstice is sunrise is 136 degrees, and the summer set is 227 degrees. And this just shows you this is 2,800. And the rise angle is 136. At that point, it's got to just over 1 degree above the horizon. Just have a quick look at the movements of the sun for anyone that doesn't know. These are an awful lot simpler than the moon. So the summer solstice is the furthest north rise of the sun. I'm talking about the northern hemisphere here, and the opposite way around in the southern hemisphere. And the sun is at its highest, and it sets at its furthest
north. Furthest north.
Yes. No, furthest south.
Rises at the furthest north, sets at the furthest south.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, north, you're right.
It's the other way around, yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Rises at its furthest south, sets furthest north.
Rises at its furthest south and sets at its furthest south, and therefore it's highest in the sky. Yeah. For somebody who's supposed to know this, I'm not doing very well on it.
Oh, that's all right. It's hard understanding what's going on when you're from a rolling ball.
The summer solstice, the rise and set are both furthest north.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So every day, then the sun starts rising further south until it reaches this point here, and this is the halfway point, the equinox, and it's much lower in the sky, as you can see, and it rises much further south and sets much further south. And then in the winter solstice, well, it depends where you're measuring it from, I guess. Yeah. And then the winter solstice, it's very low in the sky, as we know, because we have short days and we don't get much sun. And that's because the solstice is now right, or the rise position is now right down in the south. Once again, this changes by latitude, so these angles will change significantly if you go to Giza, for instance. But you can mark these out, and they're pretty regular, and they don't change by much over thousands of years. I think at the Devil's Arrows, the change is about 1 degree over 1,000 years or so. So it's not a lot. So these points vary by latitude. Sorry, I've gone to the wrong place. Ooh, I'm lost.
That's all right. We can cut this.
Yeah, we could take a break and you figure it out. We're already
Yeah,
we're out of
okay.
time.
Yeah, let's take a break. That's a good idea. Yeah.
All right. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, again. Zero mistakes.
Zero.
Executing all host and guest duties flawlessly. And we are continuing on with the... I guess what you're doing is destroying people's theories about the
Yes.
alignments of this.
Classic,
Yes,
classic
yeah.
Snake Bros
Great.
tactic.
Yes, yeah.
Take
that's
their
right.
theories and destroy them.
So we were looking at the whether this line from Thornborough to the Devil's Arrows is a solstice marker. So the angles we're looking at for the line is 141 degrees from Thornborough to the Devil's Arrows, and it's 321 degrees from the Devil's Arrows to Thornborough. Well, the sunrise on the solstice is 136 degrees, so it's 5 degrees out. And the summer set is 1 million miles out, it's 227 degrees. So absolutely nowhere near. So the theory is wrong. So we can put that down as a fail. So we go on to the rise of Sirius, which I've seen on the internet several places, and I've also in a book that I read about this. So I'll just repeat the angles we're looking for there, 141 and 321. So from Thornborough, the rise of Sirius is at 130 degrees, so it's 11 degrees out. And the set, once again, is a zillion miles out. So theory is absolute rubbish.
And so, again, the timeline, you're setting the date here at the standard model date of when
The
these
standard model date, yeah.
when they were
yeah,
supposedly created.
that's right, yeah. Seems a sensible date to set because I think it's not very far out. And you'll see at the end why I don't think it's very far out, but
Okay.
it's quite a reasonable assessment of what's happening in the sky.
Okay.
Gives my date. So anyway, that theory is rubbish. And as I've said there, it's I've repeated what's above there. So the next one is it a copy of the sky? Now, no one has done this before because they don't know that the Pleiades is the Devil's Arrows. So it's impossible for somebody to have done this. So as I've said there, we have advantages on previous people. So this is where the Pleiades culminates in 2800 BC. And you'll see if we look closely there, it's right at 180 degrees. So an object culminates when it's due south, which is 180 degrees. And the angle that's subtended there through the Orion's belt up to the Pleiades, if you project that down to the horizon, that angle is 139.17 degrees. So it's not far out. That angle does change over time due to precession. So we might be able to make a stab at the actual build date by using that as a mechanism. That's if that reason was used. But we are looking for 141.2 degrees. So we have an approximation, I think, to the angle, because as we said previously, actually measuring these things in the sky can't be easy. And I was thinking about what Russ said last week about looking in a bowl of water. And that'd be far easier to measure if you think about it than looking at the sky and so projecting your measuring tools to it. I think that sounds a really good way of measuring it. But anyway, my view of this one is possible. So
you're just so that it's not about the rise position of any of those stars specifically. It's about how they line up and drawing the line through them.
It's how this line appears in the sky.
What's at the very bottom of the line at the horizon? Is there a star there?
Sirius is on the horizon there. It's a bit further across. It's there.
That's Sirius. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting that that's just rising as the Pleiades gets to culmination.
Because the reason I'm asking that is because you've got this sort of square projected from the Pleiades, but if you made the square bigger, technically that line moves. You could wait a little bit longer and the line would rise further north or further south, whichever direction that is. You know what I mean?
But I know what you mean, but if you waited a bit longer, if you think that the Pleiades is going to move in the sky like this, it's going to
start going down.
It's going to start going down.
Oh,
so that's its highest point in the sky.
Gotcha.
So that's what dictates the square.
The square, then you just extend the square down to the horizon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
gotcha.
That's right. Yeah, and that gives you that angle.
Thank you. All right.
So
it's hard.
It's hard
drawing squares on balls, on spheres. It's weird, especially when they're spinning.
So anyway, I don't think that is why we've got the angle. The reason is going to be more exciting, believe me. Could it be based on the lunar standstill? Well, the major lunar standstill from Thornbury is 149 degrees. So it doesn't reflect the sunrise, and that's a fail. Could it be the set, though? Now, this one is more interesting because the line from Thornbury is 321.3 degrees. When the moon is half a degree above the horizon, when the moon is at 321.3 degrees, it has an altitude of 1.14 degrees, so it just sits on the horizon. So it could be right. And I can see why people think it might be, but why would you align it with a set point? The second is, this is as seen from the Devil's Arrows. Devil's Arrows doesn't seem to have any local astronomical markers. It's got some very far distant ones, but it doesn't seem to have any local ones. So it would be an exception
By
if this was included.
What do you mean by astronomical markers? Like something
So-
something to sight on? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, there's nothing around the horizon of the Devil's Arrows that you can sight on,
Okay.
and this would almost certainly need that.
Like a mountain peak or something like
Yeah,
that. Okay.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, they often put stones there and things
Yeah.
like that. And as we'll see, the henges themselves reflect both the rise and the set points of the major lunar standstills anyway. So why extend it all the way down to the Devil's Arrows? So I'm not convinced by the argument, just from the point of view of logic, despite the fact it would be relatively accurate. So I've put that down as a possible. And in fact, you'll see I've got a marking system and it gets quite a high mark. Now, the final three...
Still using red ink for your possible, though. That's mean.
The final three will bend your mind, so pay attention. So, if you remember, Canabarn was Aldebaran, and this angle is 151 degrees. So, can we find anything about Aldebaran that we can measure at 151 degrees? In fact, we certainly can, because between 9600 BC and 9800 BC, the Aldebaran rose, and it would have been 1.5 degrees or 1 degree or whatever it is, 1 degree above the horizon, at 151 degrees. So if we just have a quick look at this, this is the movements of Aldebaran. So we are down here, and this is the southernmost rise point, and that's 151 degrees, and that is at that time. So the southernmost rise is at this period of time. So that's due to precession of the equinox, the
graph you showed us?
sine curve,
Okay.
yeah. So let's have a quick look at precession. I mean, everyone will know these slides, but so everyone knows that the Earth rotates around its axis, but the axis also rotates, and it's thought to take 25,800 years for one rotation. So this shows the axis, and it comes round here in this circle, and the lean of that axis also changes. So at the moment it's 23.5 degrees. It takes 72 years to do 1 degree human lifetime, effectively. It's actually, if you divide 360 into 25,800, it's 71.66 years. Most of the time there's no North Star, and as we've said, this rock takes about 40,000 years. I think it's 42,000. This is the path of the pole. To quote one of your famous podcasts.
Path of the North Pole, pointing at the stars. Yeah.
So this is where we are at the moment. And the only two times when there is a star on this circle are now and when the henges were built. And it was Theban when the henges were built, which is coincidence. I mean, if you go to 12,000...
Yeah, Vegas
12,000
is close,
AD,
but not there.
it will be Vega and it'll be close. And
Vega.
down here, it's one of these two. But you'll see that there are a lot of times when you couldn't steer by the North Pole because they're in the pole star. So the effects of rotation, though, aren't just around, isn't just the axis moving round. The whole sky moves. And the effect that has is that the stars that are around the pole will be seen moving around, just like the pole star does. and all of those move around together. But the stars lower in the sky, and the ones that rise and set, will have their rise positions moving along the horizon, and they'll move further south or north, depends where they are in the cycle, each year. And that the average of that will be that they'll move, I guess. No, that's rubbish. Withdraw that comment. But the effect of that is that you get that sine wave. Some stars will move low enough in the sky so that they'll never rise. Now, this is the precession of the equinoxes. So as the sky turns, so obviously the constellations do, and they appear to rotate around the Earth in a year, but they move slightly less than a full rotation every year, which means that we will slowly, if you pick a time in the year, and the vernal equinox is the time that is normally chosen, you will see that every year we're a little bit further along this curve, and we're moving this way. Now, they've got us in Aquarius there. I think we're actually in the end of Pisces rather than in Aquarius yet. But we will slowly go around here. And I think we know that. But the time to move across a full constellation averages out at 2,150 years. Says here we're currently in Pisces. And this path is the ecliptic, which we saw last time. The megaliths, by the way, were built in the age of Taurus, which in itself is interesting. Right, this is what it does to the rise angles. So you'll see here that we've got the Pleiades in green, Aldebaran in red, and Sirius, which doesn't rise sometimes. It stays below the horizon from where we're viewing it in blue. So you'll see that they rock backwards and forwards. So at any point in time, you could actually navigate by knowing what stars are rising in which position. Right, precession in legends. There are 86,400 seconds in a day. 72 years are needed for 1 degree of precession. So if we take half of 86,000, it's 43,200. 72 by 600 is 43,200. We'll see 43,200 pops up a lot, and it does pop up later in what I'm showing you. The Yuga cycle lasts 4,320,000 years. From Adam to the flood was 86,400 weeks. Noah was 600 years when the flood came. Babylon was ruled by 10 kings for 432 years before the flood. On the day of Ragnarok, 800 warriors will come out of each of 550 doors to fight alongside Odin, and that gives us 43,200. So these numbers have been known forever. 72 is the number of languages spoken, was spoken at the time of the Tower of Babel.
Oh, wow.
70,
I didn't realize that.
72 is the number of names for God in the Jewish Kabbalah. It's the number of temples at Angkor Wat. It's a number of degrees between Angkor Wat and the Great Pyramid.
Wow.
Number of syllables in the Hindu Rig Veda, which I find amazing. Wow. And one for you here, Carl. It's the harmonic frequency believed to be the optimum resonance for music.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't know whether that's true or not. So, Now, this is possible, but is there any significance in the date? And I've gone a bit too far back here in this, so let's just check some of these.
I was gonna say now we're looking at it's 9600
Yeah.
to 9800
So,
BC. That's what I'm talking
yeah.
about.
So, is 9700 BC, is it significant in any way? Now, some people know the answer to this automatically and some won't. So let's just go back to first principles. So the Earth is in an ice age at the moment and has been for at least 1,000,000 years. Now, an ice age isn't a consistent level of coldness that lasts for 1,000,000 years. It has variations. And those variations are quite long periods of time. So you have generally about 100,000 years of cold, followed by about 12,000 years of warmth, and then it goes cold again. And in the cold periods, there are quite radical movements in temperature. So the last deep period of the Ice Age was 25,000 years ago. It then started warming up, and about 14,000 years ago, it was still a lot colder than it is now. But then the temperature shot up, and I mean, it did shoot up. It shot up about 10 degrees in certainly less than 20 years. And immediately after that, it crashed back down again to about half of what it had climbed to. And that crash back down corresponds to meltwater pulse 1A, which was a rapid rise in ocean sea levels. And the rise in temperature is the start of the Bowling-Allerod period, and that lasts about 2,000 years. Bowling-Allerod is ended by another crash down to the really cold period of the Little Ice Age. So the temperatures were back to what they were 25,000 years.
You mean the Younger Dryas?
And that's the start of the Younger Dryas. Okay. And there are several theories about what caused it. Some people say it's just natural variation. Some people say it's a solar flare. The leading contender, I think, is that there was an impact at that period.
Or a bombardment.
Or a bombardment. Yeah, it's more likely to be that the Earth passed through the tail of a comet, and the comet had left a whole string of bits of rubbish behind it. The Younger Dryas lasted about 1,200 years and comes to an end about 9,700, 9,600 years. And I remember when they first discovered the Younger Dryas, it was in the 90s, and the scientists were absolutely amazed because this temperature rise at the end of the Younger Dryas, once again, was about 10 degrees. And they thought
10 degrees centigrade?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They thought it had happened. It's the only way to measure temperature, isn't it?
How dare you?
How dare you?
I always was taught that centigrade was more logical, but if you look at the reasoning behind Fahrenheit, that's actually more logical. Yeah. Anyway, won't go there.
Be careful. They're going to kick you out of the UK for saying that.
They probably will. Well, certainly if they knew the rest of my political views, they would. I'd get thrown out for not believing in that climate change is doing anything about. Anyway, so they thought that this 10-degree temperature rise had occurred in about 20 years, and they were all absolutely amazed and horrified. How can it happen? I mean, but it does. I mean, we can see it happens. So. Now, that 20-year period has been shrinking. Every time you look at it, actually, it's shrunk a few years.
Yeah.
And the latest figures I've seen it happened in a year. I mean, that is absolutely catastrophic if you think about it.
Yeah.
Now, so something happened in 9,700 or 9,600, around about that date. And it might have been an impact, it might have been a solar flare, there might be all sorts of reasons. There is beginning to be, I understand, some evidence that it might be an impact. And if you think about it, if a big comet comes into the inner solar system, and by impact, as Russ said, we're talking about chains of impacts, really. Small stuff, but loads of it as you go through the tail. So you can imagine a comet has a period of, 50 years maybe, something like Comet Halley. So you pass through its tail about every 50 years. But it might be inclined to you, so you might miss it sometimes, and you might hit it others. Just get a drink.
Yeah, and a lot of it wouldn't actually be impacts; it'd be air bursts. The stuff blows up in the sky. It causes massive destruction, but that doesn't necessarily leave a crater.
Yeah.
But it imparts a ton of heat into the system, along with
that's exactly
the explosive destruction as well.
So at that date, then, we had a rapid temperature rise that was closely followed by meltwater pulse 1b. Now, meltwater pulse 1b seems to have been mainly caused by the American ice sheets melting. And a lot of that water flowed down the Mississippi Valley into the Gulf of Mexico. And just bear that in mind for a second. So that's what we've said. And it's also Plato's date for the end of Atlantis. Now, Tony will have a go at me for this, but I think there was a reasoning behind his date. It might not be that Atlantis itself was destroyed at that time, but I suspect that there was a cultural memory of something happening at that time.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I think that might be so is this. So the Dakota Sioux say that Aldebaran fell to earth after killing a serpent and created the Mississippi River.
Oh, man.
Wow.
So meltwater pulse 1b.
Oh, man. That's an amazing connection.
So I told you these.
You just blew my mind. Where's my sound effect here?
You might have to use that again, Joe.
All right, I'll keep it warmed up.
So I think that's possible. I mean, when I first came across this, I thought, this can't be possible. They can't possibly remember things over that amount of time. But the Sioux did, and Plato did. So
awesome.
It could well be possible. Right, let's look at the legend. So one of the earliest Christian settlements was at Aldborough, which is that little village behind Borough Bridge where the Devil's Arrows are. And the legend says that the devil was angry and stood on How Hill and threw stones that became the Devil's Arrows. And the little couplet that goes with it is, Borough Bridge, keep out to way, for Aldborough town I will ding down today. Now, that legend is actually extended a bit in something I was reading only yesterday, actually. And the story is that, and I don't believe that this was the original story, but the story is that Christians were beginning to come in and Druids were getting quite upset about it. So they all went to see the king So some Christian missionaries and the Druids, and they argued it out. And the Christian missionaries were beginning to win the argument. And then this wizened old Druid came in who seemed to know absolutely everything. And it does appear, by the way, that they were standing on How Hill when this happened. And the argument began to go the other way, and the wizened old Druid began to win his case. But then, halfway through the discussion, one of the missionaries noticed that the feet of this Druid were beginning to sink into the ground, and the ground was being heated by his feet. He was slowly sinking into the ground. So the missionary thought, must be the devil. So he shouted out, "Get behind me," saying, "No, devil," or whatever. And this wizened old Druid suddenly threw off his cloak and picked up rocks and started throwing them. And that became the devil's arrows. Now, it's an interesting story, but must be rubbish, mustn't it? Can't be any truth in it whatsoever. Right, How Hill. Now, I've known for ages there's been a building on top of it, but it's not a very old building, is it? I mean, 100, 200 years old, maybe. So I've not been really interested in it.
I'm sorry, I just have to laugh because that's, you're like, well, it's not really that old. It's just as old as the oldest building we have in the United States, roughly.
But when we're looking, I mean, we're very good at knocking down our old buildings in England as well, to be fair. Which I think is very sad, but there you go. But if you look further at it, this particular building was constructed on the site of an old chapel, and the chapel was dedicated to St. Michael, the Archangel. So St. Michael actually wasn't a person, so most saints are people. St. Michael was an archangel. And it was built on the top of the hill, and the chapel was called St. Michael de Mont. Now, just remember St. Michael to begin with, but in the next episode, we're going to be looking at the significance of this name as well. So this is where it was. So
ready for a break?
Yep.
Okay. And it sounds, this is amazing, man. Thank you so much. This is perfect Snake Bros content. And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Second half of the show. Continuing on with Martin Green's megalithic sky maps or star maps. And I think we're looking at How Hill.
We are looking at How Hill.
Yeah.
So, if you remember, the legend of How Hill says that the devil stood there and threw stones, and they became the devil's arrows. And we've agreed it's rubbish. But we've just found a chapel that was built on the top of How Hill that was dedicated to St. Michael the Archangel. So, the earliest date that we have absolute written evidence for the chapel was about 1200, but apparently it was mentioned in the Domesday Book, which should make it about 1080, I think.
Wait, what's the Doomsday Book? Domesday?
You don't know about the Doomsday Book?
No, I didn't.
When the Norman Conquest came along, the William the Bastard he was literally and figuratively um, wanted to know what he'd taken over in the country. So he did a complete assessment of the whole of the country, sent people around the whole country and wrote down what everyone owned and where they lived and all the rest of it.
Wow.
So, and I think that was about 1075 or thereabouts. So if it's mentioned in the Doomsday Book, we're looking 1,000 years old. Now, we already know that there was, they've done some digging around there. There's a series of earthworks and terraces going up to the hilltop, so there's some pretty old stuff there. Now, this was the best view I could find from the top of How Hill, and it's an oil painting that you could have had for £2,000 just recently.
Yeah. Wow.
So we're on top of How Hill here, and this is where the action of the monuments is. And I think you can maybe just see one of the henges down there, and the Devil's Arrows will be off this side. This white building you can see in the middle distance is Ripon Cathedral. So it just gives you an idea. But the whole, you can see the point I want to make is you can see the whole of the valley from up on there. And you remember that the legend is particularly about how these monuments got created. So it's a creation myth for the monuments. So, as I said, you can see How Hill from the Devil's Arrows and from Thornburn Northern Henge. So, could it have been a datum point for the build of the monuments? The legend could have some truth in it then.
Okay.
So is it a legend or a distant memory? So the line from How Hill to Aldeburgh passes directly through the Devil's Arrows. That line is 43,200 feet long, and you can see it on here.
Wow.
So, and you can also see the Devil's Arrows. You can see it goes directly through. Right, so we've done all this before, but 86,400 seconds in a day. It's a processional number. Multiply the height of the Great Pyramid by 43,200 gives you the polar radius of the Earth. Now, if I take a line from the Northern Henge, from How Hill to the Northern Henge, I get almost an exact right angle. It's not quite. It's 0.7 degrees out. And that line is 42,550 feet long. So,
That's
not
close.
very impressive, really. But if I go from the Northern Henge back down that line and continue to the point where it's 43,200, and then I take a right angle, that takes me direct to Aldeburgh, and both of those lines are 43,200. So if we look at this, this was my original line from the top of How Hill. So, and that was my extended line coming down. So I've taken a right angle to that, and I've come to the same place.
Wow.
So you're suggesting that maybe How Hill was an anchor point for the surveying for the entire project?
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting.
And that's why the stones were thrown from the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
So who was the devil?
Is there any significance to the point where you extended the line? Is there something down there? A standing stone or anything?
There's nothing there, but I've got mention of it later on.
Okay.
All
all
right.
right.
We'll get to that later. Oh, pulling a Marty on us.
Right. So might point the way, this, mightn't it?
Yeah.
Now for the strange stuff. So I then started looking up St. Michael and the devil. So the Bible describes Michael fighting and killing the devil, and it's part of the war in heaven, and it's in Revelation 12. Now, I would recommend anyone that believes in chaotic events in the past to read Revelation from, I think it's about chapter 7. Because there's a point in there where it absolutely clearly describes some sort of impact from the sky. I can remember when I first read it, and it was when I was just beginning the journey from being hardcore mainstream, and I read this and I thought, somebody stood and watched this thing fall from the sky.
Wow.
They must have done. It's the only way you can get this description.
Wow. That's cool.
Also, I've never heard somebody say hardcore mainstream. That's
Yeah, that's what I was, I must confess. I had to get my confession out of the way now.
This
Right, in
is
some
how you're seeking
traditions-
absolution. Huh?
That's right. In some traditions, a war in heaven is related to the flood, which is quite interesting. I then found this. So this is a Syrian icon of the killing of Saint Michael by the devil.
the killing
You'll
of the
notice-
devil. The killing of the devil by Saint Michael.
Saint
Yeah.
Michael. Did I say it the other way around?
Yeah.
Right, you'll see that
He's
Michael
holding
here is
scales.
Oh yeah.
holding
He's got
a pair
the
of
scales.
scales.
Yeah.
Now, famously, St. Michael weighs souls, and he uses those scales to do it. So, did they build this chapel then to kill the previous legend of the devil throwing the stones? So the early Christians had competition. Let's build a chapel there to St. Michael, and he killed the devil. So
Yeah.
it killed the idea. Possible,
Possible.
but stranger still.
Look at the stone. Is there stones standing over there on the cart, or is that trees?
I think that's trees.
Okay.
And what's,
But-
what's he stabbing him with?
Now.
What is that?
Now
Oh.
it gets interesting.
Yeah.
Right. St. Michael, and the picture, the text with the picture is St. Michael killing the devil with a sword in the shape of the tail of a comet.
Yes. Yeah.
Notice that?
The brimstone.
Now, interestingly, apparently in the Middle East, all depictions of St. Michael and the devil doing this, the sword is like this. The further west you come, the more sword-like it becomes, apparently,
Hmm.
which is interesting. You notice these stars
Yeah. I
as
saw
well,
the stars. Yes.
and there's lines between them.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, there's the stars. There's 5 of them.
Ah.
All right. You remember Canabarn represents Aldebaran, and its alignment points to the southernmost standstill at the end of the Younger Dryas.
Right.
Remind you of that. Aldebaran is part of the face of the bull, the high Hades.
Mhm.
Those stars look a bit like the high Hades to me.
Hmm.
Yeah? Not convinced?
Mm.
How about St. Michael's star in legend is Aldebaran?
Yep. That's interesting.
And it also, as a passing thing, it may be associated with the Eye of Horus. Also in Mesopotamian mythology, it's called the Watcher of the East. They had 4 stars that are roughly at 90 degrees to each other. Aldebaran was one of them. If you knew the rise point of any of those stars, you could pretty much navigate, really. I can't remember. Formaldehyde was one. That's not how you pronounce it, but that's what it is. I can't remember the other two. But if you look up the Mesopotamian king stars, are they? Something like that. So anyway, we have possibly a comet here. We have the Hyades, possibly. We have the devil being killed.
Well,
So
if that is the Hyades, they've got a sort of a different shape for it for sure.
Yeah.
They're pointing to a different star on the lower right because it doesn't look like that drawing.
yeah,
But it's possible. I mean, it could be.
It's artist's view, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's also it could be that they just had a different shape, that they were pointing to another star somewhere.
Well, it could be. Yeah. I mean, if the figure went down to this star.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So there's a possibility there that we're linking the legend and the Aldebaran date together to give one possible solution, where there was a comet impact. The monument itself, the whole monument, was built somehow to commemorate that. And hence you get that 152-degree angle. So I've tried to score these. So you can see the first two are zeros. Sirius is -5. Mapping the sky to the ground, I've given 5. It's 2 degrees out. Lunar standstill marker, I've got at 7. Putting these two together, I'm obviously more convinced than you. I've given it 8. You'd probably give it 6, I suspect.
No, I'd give it a solid 7, I think.
Did you test that little star cluster against the Pleiades? On the card. No, it's not 7, but it doesn't have the little tail.
That's interesting, actually, because you can obviously see 5. And the shape might... No, I haven't. And it might be worth doing, actually.
Well, the reason I ask is because in the Mithraic tradition, there's Mithras killing the bull.
That's where he stabs.
Yeah,
it.
And the whole depiction of Mithras stabbing the bull is based on a depiction of the Pleiades, not the bull. So you still may be right, but the star cluster itself is actually the Pleiades.
Yes, could be, couldn't it? Yeah. I shall check that.
Awesome.
All right. Okay, let's move on from there now. So this is our line. Now, if we split it in 2, we get the red one and the blue one. That's an exact split. And we don't think that this is solstice related at all. However, if I take a right angle to that, and that's this new red line, that gives me a marker to the summer solstice sunset, which I thought was interesting. I didn't think it was any more than interesting. So at this point, I think it's worth mentioning my 3 o'clock voices, because I've been having an ongoing conversation with them. I'd run out of ideas, basically. And I kept getting back. Look in this area here. It's probably a little bit further out, actually, it was saying, but look in this area here. I mean, all I get when I do this is a clue, and if I don't do it, I get it repeated. So this happened for a while, and I kept saying, no, I've looked, I know, absolutely sure there is nothing there. So, but I kept getting this back. So I just thought I'd mention that. So this
voices are telling you to look out there. All
right. You'll see why. So this takes us on to Ripon Cathedral. So Ripon Cathedral. cathedra is the seat of a bishop. So cathedrals and minsters are the same type of buildings. Cathedrals have a bishop, minsters don't. So, for instance, Beverley and York both have enormous churches of a similar type to a cathedral, but they're not the minsters. The 26 medieval cathedrals in England. Ripon was founded in the 660s and was probably the earliest one that was created in England, although it didn't become a cathedral until much later. There's a Saxon crypt there dating from 672, and it's the oldest structure in any cathedral in England. The building of the current building started in 1116, finished 1547.
That's a long building project.
Well, yeah, they had the Black Death and all sorts of other things.
Yeah, they had other stuff to do.
Civil War. And
Yeah.
so it was a minster until 1836, and it became a cathedral. Ripon is the oldest city in England and one of the smallest. So there's only about 15,000 people there. Now, you look at these on the outside and they're impressive, but I think you've just got to admit that that is an amazing picture.
Yes. Oh,
From the inside, these things are absolutely mind-blowing. So that's the outside. Another one on the inside, and another one.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So you can see it's pretty impressive building. There's still parts of an old 7th century crypt, as we said, and this is a picture of it. So
It's underground.
now they have pieces of a stone called the Sigurd stone, which commemorates an ancient dragon slayer. And Sigurd stones, not uncommon. There's quite a few of them around. This guy himself is the Siegfried of the Wagner ring cycle, and he was born of a very old king who married a very young bride, and the king died before he was born, and he was passed across for somebody else to look after, and this person had a son about the same age as him, and they were both incredibly poor because his father left him nothing. But the story was that there was a dragon who had a pot of gold. So this guy that, or the son of the guy that he was living with, found out about this, and they were plotting together to go and kill the dragon and get the gold. So Siegfried was the sort of military person, the big strong guy, and the other guy made him a sword to go and kill it, and he killed it. And as the dragon was dying, the dragon told him that the other guy was going to try and kill him. So Siegfried killed the other guy first. Now, I didn't think much of this. I just thought it was an interesting story, and it's an interesting piece of stone in the church. But if we're looking at dragons and comets and things like that, might be more to it than we know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Lewis Carroll's father was canon there, and this is one of the carvings that inspired Alice. It's a misericorde. Misericorde. These are on in the choir area. They have fold-down seats, wooden fold-down seats for the choir members to sit on, and this is on the underneath of the seat. So when it comes up, you can see it. But this is a griffin clutching a rabbit as it tries to escape down the hole. Just thought that was interesting. Now, back to what we were talking about. The layout of the building itself is about 3 degrees out of east-west, which is interesting. Most of the cathedrals I've looked at north, south, east, west. There are all sorts of angles. So if I extend my solstice line back in the opposite direction, I get this. So you can see there's Ripon Cathedral. So it runs through the grounds of Ripon Cathedral, and it's actually less than 100 feet from the southern door.
Wow.
Now, not really got onto it yet, but I think that the Thornborough Henges were an observatory, and I think they were dedicated to the moon. When I was talking to Pete Cheeseborough about this, he said, well, that's an interesting construct around there. And when I found it on an old map, it turns out this is Moonwood, so might be related in some way. Yeah.
Interesting.
Now, if I correct the line and just run it through the centre of the cathedral, the centre of the tower, but parallel to my own line, it actually intersects with an old earth mound called Pudding Pie Hill. This is Pudding Pie Hill. It's an earth mound. It's about 200 foot in diameter, and it's been identified as a round barrow. And here you can see it in LiDAR. There's an information board there that dates it between 2400 and 1500 BC. I think it's a little bit older than that, but it was excavated in the 19th century, and the remains of a large warrior were found, and that was dated at 6th century AD. And of course, you got a lot of intrusive burials. And
What do they mean by
large
large
warrior?
Well, I immediately thought, I wonder if it's a giant. But at that day, it probably wouldn't be. And I suspect a large warrior around then would be about 6 foot, wouldn't it?
Okay.
I mean, I don't know, because there's very scant evidence of what was there.
Of course.
So, yes.
That's just a. Well, this man was large. It's just British understatement.
These guys from America turned just after it was dug up and took the remains away.
Yeah.
So local legend says this hill was raised by fairies, and the fairies were positively so good as to furnish pies and puddings for their juvenile votaries. If you run around it 9 times and place your ear to the ground, you would hear the fairies conversing inside.
Wow. Is that maybe an old
astronomical?
memory of a comet cycle?
No, I'm not claiming that at all. I just thought it was an interesting tale.
That's just the kind of stuff I think about when you have something orbiting around something else.
Hey, it could be. Yeah.
Around
Actually, that's an interesting thought. Yeah. The 9th time around and it hits you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the point is, this line finishes up there. So, and that's exactly where the voices were talking about.
Have you gone out there and tried? You need to go out there and try running around it 9 times.
3 a.m. voices.
And see,
he doesn't need to do that to hear voices.
I guess not.
There's a story about Rudstone monolith, where if you run around it 100 times, and is it an angel or is it the devil that appears? I can't remember what it is that appears there. But this chap who was writing up this tale said, a friend and I, when we were young, ran round it very frequently, but we never got beyond 99.
You don't want him to appear. Yeah.
Seen from the cathedral, you get the land is rising up here, and this is a hilltop, and then it drops back down here. So seen from the cathedral, the summer solstice, sun rises exactly at the high point on the main line, and once when it crosses the line, or when it hits the line, it'll be 1 degree above the hilltop. So it's a solstice marker from there. Now, interestingly, if you look from Pudding Pie Hill, obviously you get the same hill profile. That picks out the minor lunar standstill.
Oh, wow.
So I've not found anywhere before where the same line represents two astronomical alignments. The cathedral site is exactly 3,000 metres from the main line. Now, back to whether How Hill is a design centre or a marker for the rest of the build. If I draw a line from sorry, this has got out of sequence. Can I just break out here? Do you want a break?
Yeah, we can.
Sure,
We can take a break. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I thought I had the slides in the right sequence, but there's one that's missed out.
Yeah, no problem. We'll take a break. Be right back for the final segment.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, for the final segment of this episode of, what are we calling it?
Megalithic star maps.
There we go.
Episode 313.
All right, let's see what we're finding on the ground here, Martin.
Okay, so if I extend this line further back to the southwest, it runs right into a stone called Howith Moor Standing Stone. Now, I've given you a long view of it there and a closer view. You'll notice that the shape of this field is nothing like any of the others around it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So looks a bit like a Cersus to me, or a Cursus, or however you pronounce that word.
What's
now,
that? Oh, okay.
right. I couldn't. If you remember, we discussed this last time. So this is an artist's impression of one that's near was near Stonehenge. So you can see that it's an earth mound completely surrounding it, and something in the middle, and generally rectangular. No one really knows what they were for, so all sorts of suggestions: ceremonial, funerary, observatories, related in some way to rivers, ungulate traps, so that's cows and deer and things like that. Oh, maybe race tracks. So no one knows. They haven't got a clue.
It's weird that the name is Cursus or Cersus.
Yeah.
Like curse. Curse
Ah,
us.
Yeah, I was thinking more of circus, actually.
Circus. Yep.
Yeah.
Curse us.
Yeah, but it could be cursed.
Circle. Is
Yeah.
Certainly. There's one at Thornborough, which is underneath the central henge. So you can see that it seems to be in three sections, really. So I spent some time trying to get alignments out of that, but I couldn't. So no one has an idea what they are. But if you think about the shape, then that does look very similar to the shapes we've seen. Now, the stone itself is quite similar to the Devil's Arrows. So we see this is the northern stone of the Devil's Arrows, and this is the standing stone in the field. So same grooves. And, the tail is that some of the top of this has been chopped off anyway, so it could have been square at the beginning. This is a quote from one of the farmers. When the fields were tilled, we found that all of them were easy to turn over except the one with the stone in it. there's virtually no soil depth of any depth to write home about. So there's something different going on there.
Like they pulled the soil out of that area to build the
mound
mound
curses.
wall around it, and that makes it
Yeah.
less muddy if you're living in there or whatever.
Yeah, possibly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, this is the complete line then. So it goes from Haworthmoor Standing Stone through Ripon Cathedral to Pudding Pie Hill. Now, Pudding Pie Hill is 41,818 feet from the main axis. The Earth's diameter in feet is 41,804 multiplied by 10 to the third. So Pudding Pie Hill stands a tenth of the Earth's diameter from the axis of the line.
Wow.
That works in any unit of measure. I mean, I've done it in feet. You can do it in miles or meters or whatever. Right, now back to where we broke last time. If I then go to this standing stone here and draw lines to Thornborough Central and the Devil's Arrows, the lengths, you'd expect them anyway to be very similar because of the way that the triangles are built. But the difference is 42 feet, and that looks as though it's supposed to be 60,000 to me if they're measured in feet. If I repeat that from Pudding Pie Hill to the Devil's Arrows and Thornborough Central, I get something that looks as though it's supposed to be 50,000. So we're talking about a definite sort of 5/6 type thing. So it doesn't matter what unit of measure you use, there's a relationship between the size of those and the size of those.
Oh, man. What is this? Oh, yeah, the 5/6. There's a. Go ahead, keep going. Sorry, that just.
Yeah, go on.
Well, I'm just trying to remember what the significance of that is. I know that there was a pope, Sixtus V. Like there is an importance to this this fraction. I can't.
Oh,
remember what it
right.
is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I shall have to look that up.
Yeah.
So, if you're building something, you really need 2 datum points. Is Pudding Pie Hill the second datum point?
Yeah, I think so. It's
Yeah,
that
so
is
they're
very
laying
interesting.
things out from 2 places. They're measuring off angles. You get that laid out, measured along that angle. That laid out, measured along that angle. Seems as though it could fit.
Have you measured the angles of these? Of this?
No,
shape?
I haven't. No. Might be worth doing.
Yeah.
Right, so this distance here is 95,025 feet. The distance to the cathedral is 51,618 feet. If you divide one by the other, I get 18.5. Lunar cycle is 18.6 years.
Yeah.
And once again, that works in any unit of measure. What I'm actually trying to prove here is that all of this is linked together, so that from that central point, Ripon Cathedral is linked in. Stone down here is the mound up there is. So if I go to the halfway point of this line, it's in a place called Sharrow, and Sharrow Cross is 500 feet from the midpoint of the line. So now Sharrow Cross is supposed to be a 13th century cross. And it marked the limits of the sanctuary area around Ripon Cathedral. I don't know whether you know about sanctuary or not, but if you were being hunted by the police or whatever qualified as the police in those days, and you could get to an area of sanctuary. You could claim sanctuary, and that would protect you from them for, I think it was 40 days. So you had to either do a deal with them or manage to escape in that 40-day period. And Ripon Cathedral was one of them, but there is a surrounding area that you needed to get into.
Huh.
So remember How Hill, and we were talking about this angle of the line?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Green Line is 43,200 feet long from the northern hinge, and it overshoots the top of How Hill very slightly. The yellow line is at right angles to the Green Line. It's 43,200 feet long to Aldeburgh. Now, I've drawn in 3 lines here. This little blue line gives me a profile of the altitude of the hill. So it's not relevant really to the argument, but you'll see why in a minute. This red line goes to the top of How Hill, and it's 224 degrees from Ripon Cathedral. But the blue line there is 222 degrees, and it goes right into the corner of this right angle. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The winter solstice sunset is 225.5 degrees, but we have a hill in the way. So at 222.2 degrees, the sun is just touching the hill line as it sets.
Wow.
There you go.
Hmm.
So
That's interesting. So it's a sight point from
yeah,
but it's from
That's
Aldeburgh or what?
that's from the cathedral.
Oh, the cathedral. Okay, gotcha.
So
That's cool.
the sun sets right in the right angle of the green and yellow triangle. All right, still not sure. Remember that the cathedral centre line is 3 degrees off east to west. Well, we're almost at 90 degrees at this latitude. We're almost at 90 degrees between the solstice sunsets and sunrises. So if we were stood on the top of the tower and we looked out at, so this is a square, and these diagonals on the square, we see looking up that way the summer solstice sunrise, down that way the winter solstice sunrise, and the same with the sets. So they're very slightly out of the angles, but you wouldn't notice. If you were an individual there for some sort of ceremony, you would just see the sun rising along that line. You wouldn't notice the difference. Now, why would a Christian church do that? That shows one of the angles. There's the winter solstice one I spotted, actually, because eventually you look at so many solstice angles that you begin to understand where they go. I suddenly thought, that looks like a winter solstice to me.
That's cool.
So, Clueless in the Discord found this quote, but Gothic-style cathedrals, several of them have East End geometry, so East End, derived from stone circles. Now, that was from a book that Randall recommended and she bought. And she was reading one of the posts and she said, you know this?
Wow. Sacred geometry, symbolism, and purpose in religious structures.
Yeah. Now, just a last little bit. I don't think the cathedral site is all that is there. So there is a mound here. It's exactly 1,000 feet from the west end of the cathedral, and it's called Ailey Hill, and it's been called a tumulus on that map, which I found. It's 865 feet from the central tower. It's been identified as a barrow or a motte, and it's subject to a number of local traditions linking it to the Dark Age monastery and Dark Age battle, and they've dug up intrusive burials there. They don't think the standard model says it's natural, because you don't have to dig down very far to get down to shale, really, that's left over from Ice Age flooding. So as it says, that it's been used as a natural mound, but it is exactly on the same axis, and those numbers appear to have some significance.
Wow.
Right, is there any evidence that Ripon was a significant place in the past? So this was from a book, A Guide to Ripon, Harrogate and Fountains Abbey and Bolton Priory, written in 1851. So we have far more direct and conclusive evidence that the immediate vicinity of Ripon was regarded with particular interest and veneration. One of the tribes of the Brigantine Celts had chosen it as their station for the dispensation of justice and the celebration of religious rites. In fact, they had made it their seat of government. Well, you don't do, I mean, they go back pre-Roman, and you don't do that just because you want to. You do things like that because there's a tradition. So I suspect this tradition goes back a long way. So that's the Ripon Cathedral hypothesis. Convinced or not? I don't know. I think it's possible.
I love it.
So there's a number of options here that we've been through that seem to hold water. So it could be a major northern moonset marker. Could be aligned to the ground. The Pleiades aligned to the ground. Could be aligned to the southern standstill of Aldebaran, and whether you believe the St. Michael thing or not, that angle is still right, and that angle goes back to that date. So there could be something there. Or it could be the Ripon Cathedral thing, or maybe a mixture of them all. So it seemed to me that the summer solstice line from Ripon Cathedral predates the building of the henges and stones. I mean, it was there. It was probably a ceremonial site going back a long way. And that seems to be confirmed by the legend on How Hill and the winter solstice sunset there. And those significant measurements from the hill. So the cathedral was built on a very ancient site, and the earliest known site we know was built on the site of an earlier religious building. So these probably go back years and years and years and years and years. And we're pretty certain that at Rudstone, the church was built on a succession of older sites. So this is a tradition that does go back and does go across not just Britain, but a lot of Western European sites. So we know that a lot of the sites were reused. I'll comment there about what I've said about Rudstone. Now, doing the line of the Thornborough to the Devil's Arrows at right angles seems to be quite symbolic as well, because in astrology it's a quartile, and a quartile. So 90 degrees is called a quartile, and it has significance. It represents 3 houses of the zodiac, or 6,450 years. So if I add 2,800, to 6,450, I get 9,250 BC, so it's in the age of Leo. Leo is pretty close to the period of the Younger Dryas. So Canaban represents the furthest south rise of Aldebaran, which we've discussed, in 9,700 BC, and it's a quartile before the build date.
Huh. Wow.
So maybe that right angle does have significance. So obviously the ancients knew about this solstice sunrise from there, and they all obviously knew this. The real question is, did they know about Aldebaran?
Did they know about the 9,700 date?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm tempted to say probably a 60% probability that they did.
They did. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so anyway.
So real quick, I've been trying to find out what this 5 and 6 is. I know that there's some significance that I can't recall with it being 5/6 or 6/5. But in numerology, 5 represents freedom, versatility, and adaptability, while 6 signifies harmony, balance, and responsibility. So if you have this diamond shape and one of it's, basically the 5 and the other is the 6, then they're kind of combined. And it is 5/6 or 6/5.
Yeah.
Because they put it in this particular shape. Then you're combining these two effects, numerological effects. I think this is interesting.
That's cool.
Being at 60,000 feet and 50,000 feet. Now, of course, that's when it's measured in feet. You get the 5 and the 6. So
no, but it'd still be 5/6 though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, right.
Be measured.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fraction would be the same no
Yes,
matter.
right.
Yeah. So, and that was the point. I mean, I've got a few places where I have feet in, but generally nearly all of them come down to dividing one by the other, and therefore it's a proportion. So that distance from Pudding Pie Hill to the centre line, for instance, that works in any units you want to measure them in.
Yeah.
Who knows? But as I said at the beginning, quite a lot of this is subjective, and you've got to take a decision on whether you think it's important or not. And I think there are degrees of belief that you can put on this, and my degree of belief on the map itself is just about 100%. Some of these are a bit less, but compelling nonetheless.
Oh yeah.
So, do we want to break at this point, or do you want another small section?
Yeah, we're in the final segment, so you go ahead and finish up, man.
Right.
Yeah.
So, are we looking at a special location in terms of latitude here? So, this is the distance to the North Pole, for instance. And you can see that's 54. Well, you can't quite see, but it is 54 degrees. So, some distances. So, the distance from the North Pole to the Devil's Arrows is 10% of the Earth's circumference. And it's, if you measure the equatorial circumference, or the polar circumference, the polar one is slightly nearer. So the distance off is very small. Can't remember what percentage accuracy is, but it's almost spot on. So Pudding Pie Hill we've just seen is 1/1000th of the Earth's diameter from the axis line. This is one we mentioned last time. The central henge is 24,800 foot from the northern one.
2,480. Right?
Yeah, sorry. The circumference of the Earth is 24,883.
Yeah.
So this is one that only works in feet. Central Henge to the southern one is 2,400. The number of hours in a day if you divide by 100. The top two are the convincing ones, I think. Location itself, Devil's Arrows is 54 degrees north, which doesn't sound much, but if you divide 54 by 90, you get 60%. So it's 60% of the way from the equator to the pole, and that obviously equates to 15% of 360 degrees. The latitude of the Devil's Arrows gives some interesting things when you look at the extreme angles of sun and moon rise and set. So the winter solstice sun rises 45 degrees from due south. So here, and you can see it actually rising there. So it's at 135. Major lunar standstill is at 30 degrees from due south. So there is nowhere else, no other latitude in the northern hemisphere where that happens. And I would argue that that has some significance. This says it's the only latitude where the relationship between the solstice and both the major and minor lunar standstills enable you to look down that hill from Ripon Cathedral to Pudding-Pie Hill. Obviously, that'd apply a few miles each way.
Yeah.
But it's somewhere near. And if you lay out the monuments from Ripon Cathedral, and that line going to the solstice, and then go off at 90 degrees, it's the only place in the northern hemisphere where the line then out to Canterbarn would point to the southernmost rise of Aldebaran. So you go further north or further south, that wouldn't occur. So you can cross out a few of those if you want, but it still shows that those monuments have been carefully planned using advanced astronomy and cartography.
Yeah, it does imply like that kind of planning. You know, they needed really good maps. They need to say, we need to put it about here, somewhere in here. Let's go to the site and see if we can find some good spots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the more you look at this, the more you think that these were pretty sophisticated people.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, just to summarize then, so today we've looked at the possible reasons for laying out the monuments in the way that they've been laid out. We've discounted some of them. We're still left with the major northern moon set. We've still got in the southern rise of Aldebaran. We think the legend might hold some water, even if it's only they stood on here and took sightings to the sites.
Right.
And Ripon Cathedral appears to be related to the whole thing. Now, I suspect that any archaeologist looking at this would think, piffle.
Piffle. I agree. That's exactly the word I thought they would think too.
So next episode, then, we have a look at the wider area of Yorkshire. We then have a look at, do you remember last episode we spoke about alignments and whether you could draw lines meaningfully through sites, such like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a look at some of those and my views on that, and sort of minimal amount of testing I've done on it.
All right.
And then I don't know whether you know, but I have a little hobby of collecting sites that are called after the devil.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
we definitely
man.
want to go through that. Well, wait, are you going to give us some dates here? Are we going to get into your idea of the dates, or is that next episode?
That's the final episode.
Oh man,
right.
we'll get to that later.
I could spoil it until you know.
No, it's all right. No. Well, this has been really amazing, man. I'm looking forward to the final one. What I will have to ask, what is your favorite out of all these possibilities? And you've said, you showed us which ones you say, okay, these don't pass muster. But out of the ones that are left, what is your favorite? I mean, is it a combination of them, or?
I think it is a combination, but I think Ripon was important going back a long, long way.
And you think that it was obviously the cathedral wasn't there when this
No.
megalithic structure was built, so there was something there. But then you think
There
maybe
was something there, yeah.
But then you think that the people who built the cathedral were aware of.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
wow. That's the
if you
really interesting
could-
part.
If you could go to that cathedral, or somebody in the Snake Force could go there, go inside and look in detail at the symbolism, it'd be awesome if there was some kind of correlation in the symbolism to.
Yes, it would,
To
wouldn't it?
this.
Yeah.
You start doing an Indiana Jones
wanna
on the
go.
floor tiles.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Dang.
Yes, I don't think they'd be very impressed.
Well, you got to wait for her to stamp the book. That's how he did it, right? He waited. Bam, she stamps the book. Bam, he hits the floor.
Like the I'm thinking about the images in the stained glass windows that point in that direction or whatever. It'd be
Oh,
cool
yeah.
if there was like something that maybe symbolizes the some of the other sites.
I mean, I'd want to be looking for the Pleiades, the Orion
Yeah.
stars, anything that imply like
The bull or
yeah,
or
I mean,
the devil.
the monuments themselves are the devil's arrows in the
Yeah.
symbolism somewhere.
That'd be awesome.
I mean, there's going to be
If they
you
had
know-
a depiction of the
wouldn't it?
devil
Yeah.
shooting arrows. that,
yeah, there you go.
come
From a
on.
hill. Come on. Yeah.
Someone go there.
Saint Michael killing the devil with a comet.
Yes.
I might just be able to fit it in next week.
All right.
Hey.
Fantastic.
All right, buddy. Well,
Yeah, I think we can wrap it. The
Love it.
sands of time are
Appreciate it.
just now. Bam.
oh, show's over.
The show
Alright.
is over. Thanks so much, Martin. Looking forward to next week.
Okay, thanks for that. I didn't think that went as well as the previous one.
I think it went great. It was really good. Yeah.
Well, we'll see how it comes out.
Yeah. Well, listen, thanks to everybody who supports the show and everybody who listens and watches. I hope you guys are enjoying this as much as we are. Yeah, look forward to more Martin next week as we get to the rest of that later. We love you guys.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.
Good night.